We're still missing a couple bit. I'd like to state that there was no action taken during the executive session. Do I have a motion on the motion?
Madam Chair, this is Dave Bagley. I move that we defer the motion until we have heard the rest of the evidence.
Do I have any second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Cora?
Yeah. Do you want us to have any comments on it?
Oh, sorry, discussion. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair, since I asked for comments, I'll say some things. This is Dave Bagley again. I think it's, it was an interesting motion. As I said before we went into executive session, I still have questions about who really has to prove what. I'm interested to hear the rest of the evidence, and because I think all of these things being rolled into one docket, I'd like to just hear everything before I make a decision on this motion. So that's why I will vote in favor of this motion.
Anybody else have any comments?
This is Deb Ballmer. I don't feel like I have a good handle on who exactly is bearing the burden of proof on what. And so I just really hesitate dumping the case at this point. And they could choose not to call any more witnesses and say, we're good to go.
Well, I sort of do want to make a comment. Although I seconded the motion and I'll vote for the motion, because I think that's proper. I think at some point as we deliberate this thing, we want to be very, very clear on who brings the objection and what they are objecting to. I mean, we understand because we sort of got, I think, a little wrapped around the axle when we started getting into this arena of informal conference. I think at some point, Madam Chair, I'd like to make sure that we have a list that details out exactly the stage of the process we're at, who's done what so far, has the director made a decision or not made a decision, has the administrator made a decision, has he not made a decision, what has he made that decision on, and get clear on the petition from the PRBRC. Because as I look at the beginning of the petition, I see that they're objecting to the decision made by the agency to transfer the permits. And the basis of the objection is on the appraisal and it's on the applicant violator system review. And so I may be missing something, and so I just wanted to make that comment that as we as a council go through this thing, I'd like to make sure we're clear on that so that we have a good collaboration when we get there. That's my comment.
Mr. Lentz?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Steve Lenz. I don't necessarily agree with all the remaining board members. That's why we're here, so that we all have our own opinions and our own conclusions. I do feel that the transfer of the permits has been shown through the documentation that we've been provided, that within the contingencies, it more than addresses the appraisal and the requirements that we need for reclamation. And that's why I feel the way that I do. But we will see how the vote turns out and go from there.
Mr. Rudakovich? Mr. True?
I don't have a whole lot of comments. I will probably vote affirmative on this deferment just to see what other evidence can be presented, just to make sure we have the entire picture of what we're moving on.
And my comment is I'm always in favor of more information rather than less. That's generally what I base my votes on. So no other discussion? Okay, Mr. Cora? Yes, no?
I vote in favor of the motion.
Dr. Bagley?
Aye.
Deb?
I,
Mr. Wentz?
Me?
Shane?
Aye.
And I vote aye also. So we will defer the motion until the end of the hearing. Thank you. I will pass that back to
Okay, so I guess technically we're back on the record in the contested case proceeding. And I believe the objector has rested.
That's correct.
So in our agreed sequence of proceedings, Black Jewel, it's your turn to present your case.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer. I would like to call Mark Throne to the stand, but point of order, may Mr. Brockman be excused?
Sure, this is a witness that you're expecting to.
Yeah, I'll have to call him tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Unless there's some objection, I think that's fine.
Thank you very much.
Drive safe.
Thank you.
So can you raise your hand and be sworn? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, subject to the penalty of perjury? I do. You may question the witness.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Would you care to introduce yourself to the council here, please?
Sure. My name is Mark Thrall. I'm a senior environmental manager for Black Jewel West, which includes Eagle Butte and Bel Air mines. A little bit of history. I've been in mining for over 30 years. Environmental compliance mainly for about 27 years of that. And so a lot of the documents we talked about were, through my role at Black Jewel.
Sir, where do you currently reside?
In Gillette, Wyoming.
And how long have you lived there?
I've been in Gillette a little over 18 years.
You raised your family in Gillette, Wyoming?
I did. I have 3 kids, all graduated from Campbell County. 1 from the new high school, 2 from the old. Also have 2 grandchildren, also residing in Gillette. So Gillette's home. It's where we plan on staying.
Now, you said that you're the senior environmental manager for Black Jewel. Did I hear you right?
Correct.
How long have you held that title?
That actual title I've had for 5 years. Prior to that, I've been with Black Jewel for 18 years. Prior to becoming the manager, my title was environmental engineer, kind of a permit coordinator, compliance person for mainly at Eagle Butte. Did do quite a bit of work during that time frame at Bel Air also.
I think you said you've been with Black Jewel for 18 years. Did you mean months?
Well, I'm sorry. Black Jewel, 18 months, and their predecessors for 18 years. So I've been at Eagle Butte and Bel Air mines, I should clarify that, for 18 years.
So what duties do you perform on a daily basis as an environmental manager or senior environmental manager?
Well, I'm in charge of both environmental groups at Eagle Butte and Bel Air. So I have a staff that reports to me. We're responsible for all permitting, environmental compliance out in the field. Just a variety of, not only land quality, water quality, air quality, all our permits. We do the applications, we do the reporting. Anything involved with environmental compliance falls under my departments.
And those job duties you've done for about 18 years, is that right?
18 years in Wyoming, but previous to that, I also worked for Homestake, environmental until they shut down. Spent about 10 years out at Nevada in hard rock mining with Anglo and Elko, and lived in Ely for a couple of years. So I've been in environmental compliance for about 27 years.
Now, we've been discussing today exhibits that I believe are sitting in front of you in that binder, particularly DEQ Exhibit number 2 and DEQ Exhibit 3. Can you check to make sure those are in front of you real quick?
Yep.
All right, let's talk about DEQ Exhibit 2 real quick. Can you take a peek at that, please? Sir, do you recognize this document?
I do.
Okay, what is this document?
It's the application to transfer the permits from Contura to Black Jewel.
Is number 2 there, is it for Eagle Butte or Bel Air or both? Do you know? Can you look at 2 and 3?
Yeah, 2 is Bel Air. 3 is Eagle Butte.
Did you fill out this permit transfer request for Black Jewel?
Either I physically filled it out or it was done under my direction.
I want to go ahead and cut to the point here. If you look, both, you can pick either one, either DEQ 2 at page 29 or DEQ 3 at page 33. And just let me know which one you choose to look at.
All right, I gotta find the page number, so. Right.
33, did you say?
That would be DEQ 3, page 33, where you can look at DEQ 2 at page 29.
Okay, for Bel Air line,
Yes, sir.
page 33. Oh, 29.
So you're on DEQ exhibit number 2 and you're going to page 29, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. At the top of that page, what table is that?
Table 1.10-2.
And what is included, what information did you include in this table?
In this table is the 3-year history of violations. This one is for the Bel Air one. So it'd be for Bel Air, we would you submit the application.
And what did you fill in there?
I filled in our 3-year history in Wyoming for violations.
And just for a point of the record, I want to draw the council's attention to Wyoming statute there, part 46 we've been talking about, subpart A, Romanet 14, would be XIV. Is that statute in front of you?
Could you repeat the number again, please?
This is 406A, subpart 14.
Okay.
I believe it was handed out as a handout exhibit by council for.
You're talking about the unnumbered exhibit that Ms. Anderson.
That's correct.
Oh, yes.
And Mr. Thrall, do you have a copy of that in front of you?
I do.
Outstanding. All right, now I don't want to gloss over this. Kind of in the middle, any department or agency in the United States pertaining to air, water, environmental protection incurred. Do you see where I'm at there where it says incurred?
I do not.
Mr.
No, it'd be the very
Handout,
last one, the last on this paragraph how it's broken out. It's the last paragraph.
Okay.
Incurred. You see that now?
Yes.
Incurred by whom? What does that statute say?
By the applicant,
By the applicant. Who was the applicant for the permit transfer?
Black Jewel West, Eagle Butte and Bel Air mines.
And how was the management structure for Black Jewel West set up? Who do you report to?
I report to Joff Pilon. He's the COO of Black Jewel West.
And where does Joff reside? Where does he live?
Gillette.
Do you have any interaction or any control over any eastern operations on the Black Jewel East side of things?
I do not. It's separate management.
So you filled out this table 1, -10, I don't have it up anymore, so I can't say it off the top of my head. Table 1.10-2
I did.
with the violations of the applicant. Is that correct?
That's correct.
This permit application that you filled out, had you ever filled out one like this before in your work history?
This is the fourth one that I've done since I've been in Gillette in 18 years.
Have any of those permit transfer requests been accepted?
All of them have, except
And did you treat this one any differently than any other permit transfer document you filled out?
I did not.
Okay. Now, we've talked a little bit about the AVS website. Do you know what the AVS website is?
I do.
And have you run AVS searches before in your history?
I have.
Okay. Now, you didn't put the AVS website in table 1.10-2, correct?
Correct.
But the AVS information it was read and it was available to the DEQ just by plugging in the name Black Jewel. Is that correct?
Correct.
You weren't trying to hide anything from anybody when you filled this out.
No, I fully understood that the state would run the ABS.
And you understand the AVS website can be run by anybody in the general public. Do you know that? Let me ask you on the AVS citations listed for Black Jewel on the AVS website, none of them were willful in nature with the intent to cause irreparable harm to the environment, were they?
Absolutely not.
Now, you've never been employed by Revelation Energy, have you?
I have not.
You've never been employed by Keystone Development, something?
I have not.
And then I think there was another one that was listed on that AVS poll. Pardon me. So I'll pull the exhibit real quick. I believe it was DEQ 11. No. Okay, I'll move on. How many environmental citations has Black Jewel received since Black Jewel's been operating this mine for 18 months?
Zero.
I'm sorry, how many?
Zero. We have not had any violations.
And the management essentially stepped over from Contura to Black Jewel, is that fair?
That's correct.
And have you changed anything from when it was operated by Contura to now that it's operated by Black Jewel?
No, we still have the same philosophy on day-to-day.
And the same management team?
Same management team.
You guys really haven't missed a beat, is that right?
No.
Now, you submitted these permit applications to the DEQ for consideration, is that correct?
Correct.
And did you received a letter that's DEQ 12 and 13. Can you go ahead and flip to those for me? Can you go ahead and look at DEQ 12?
Okay.
And if you look in the first paragraph of this letter addressed to you, it says this application is deemed technically complete. Do you see that?
I do.
What does technically complete mean to you?
That the material and the documents that I submitted are filled out correctly with the information that is required by the DEQ to do their assessment.
And if you could look at DEQ number 13, please. And that also is listed as technically complete, is that right?
That's correct.
And have you complied with all the requirements to fulfill and send in this permit application?
We have.
Do you believe there's any reason that this permit should not be transferred?
I have no reason why it shouldn't be.
And remind me again, how many of these permits have you filled out and done in the past?
This is the fourth transfer.
And do you see any reason why the collateral bond should not be the same as it was for Contura as part of the bonding collateral?
Objection, Mr. Hearing Officer. I'm not sure adequate foundation was laid that Mr. Thrall is the bonding person for the company and has any involvement at all with the submittal of the real property collateral bonds for the company.
I'll lay a more thorough foundation.
All right.
Mr. Thrall, do you have anything to do with bonding?
I do.
Can you explain to the council here what all you do to assist with bonding?
Just to understand bonding, we do it every year. We do an estimate is what it's called. And so we actually hire a contractor and, it's a snapshot in time. They look the cost of closing the mine in, an unlikely event that we walked away in the middle of the night. That material is submitted to us. It's followed by what's called Guideline 12 with the state. And I submit that to the state for their review. If they don't agree with certain parts, they come back with comments. We address those comments, change the tables, if they're correct, we're not. Change the tables, resubmit it, and then the DEQ will either accept or, approve the bond.
And part of the bonding here in particular, do you suggest or request that an appraiser be used to appraise some of the lands that are held as collateral for the bond?
I do. I did not personally request them, but I got the approval from the state on who we wanted to use. Then our land manager actually, that was kind of his project to submit and have the land appraised.
And who was it that was selected to do the appraisal for the lands?
Mr. Brockman.
Bob Brockman, who was sitting next to you all day today,
Yes.
who had to go to some kind of board meeting he's a part of. Okay. Great. And did Mr. Brockman complete appraisal? Do you know?
He did.
Okay. And do you know?
Objection, Mr. Hearing Officer. I think actually the record will reflect there wasn't an actual appraisal done for the permit transfer applications. There was a recertification of an appraisal previously done.
Not sure that's really an objection, but if you'd like to ask the witness to clarify that on the cross-examination, you'll have a chance to do that.
Okay, sure.
I'll cut it more finely. In 2017, Mr. Brockman completed an appraisal, is that right?
He did.
And in 2018, he recertified it?
He did.
And in 2019, he did another one, is that right?
Correct.
So we have a new one still yet today. Okay. All right. So then I'll go back to my original question. Do you see any reason with your experience in bonding and getting the land appraisal done why the collateral bond should not be the same for Black Jewel as it was for Contour?
I do not.
Okay. Sir, I appreciate your time, counsel. I appreciate your time for letting me present Mr. Thrall. That's all the questions I had for him now, but I reserve my time to ask some more questions if some come up. Thank you.
And counsel, help me out here. Black Jewel's at the end of the line of our sequence, so the DEQ have any questions for this witness?
In some measure, it would make more sense for me to go after PRBRC since we are in adversarial posture, but I'm happy to go if that's your preference.
What's your pleasure collectively?
I think the PRBRC should go next.
Is that okay, Ms. Anderson?
Sure,
Okay.
it's fine.
All right.
And I always get confused on where DEQ is in these proceedings, just how it is. Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Thrall. Good afternoon. All right, so we were chatting a little bit about, it's DEQ Exhibit 10. Can you pull that up?
Okay.
All right. Are you familiar with DEQ Exhibit 10?
Yes, looks familiar.
Oh, yeah, I probably do. Sorry. And Mr. Thrall, that's your name at the bottom of this letter, correct?
Correct.
So you wrote this letter?
Correct.
Okay, and you submitted it, at the top of the letter, it says to Mr. Kyle Wentland?
Correct.
That's correct, okay. Could you read the second paragraph of the letter?
The outstanding violations shown on the January 16, 2018 applicator violator system check have all been addressed and resolved. And as of today, there are no outstanding violations.
Okay, earlier you were testifying that there's kind of a segregation between the western mines and the eastern mines of Black Jewel, right?
Correct.
What information did you use to write this paragraph to the DEQ?
Knowing that they were taken care of.
Yeah, how did you know they were addressed and resolved? these violations?
We have contacts in the east, you know, in the same position that I'm in. And I imagine, I don't remember exactly, but I probably called them and was notified that everything was addressed.
So you didn't remember exactly who you talked to or what information you relied on to write that paragraph?
Well, not in January, you know, over a year ago, I couldn't tell you exactly who it was, but somebody in the east
Okay.
within the company.
Do you remember if it was anybody at Revelation Energy company
No,
with a lot of
no.
those violations?
I've never spoken to anybody from Revelation Energy.
Okay, but they had a lot of those violations, right?
I assume, yeah.
So how did you know they were addressed and resolved if you never talked to anybody at that company?
Talking to whoever my contact was in the east.
Okay, did you talk to Jeffrey Hoops?
Probably not on this issue, but I've spoken to him.
You spoke to him, and could you explain a little bit about who Jeffrey Hoops is in relation to the company that you work for?
He's the owner.
He's the owner, okay. So he's the guy, when we talk about ownership and control, he's the guy who matters because he's the owner.
That's kind of a loaded question. I mean, he's in control of certain things, but
But he's your owner.
true.
Okay. Did you, when you received the information to write that paragraph, did you personally verify any of it? Or did you take it at kind of face value from whoever that you don't remember gave it to you?
Well, I just took it as face value because, I mean, there's no reason not to, because you fully understand that the state is going to run the ABS before a permit is approved, so
Okay.
it wasn't a concern.
And Mr. Thrall, how do you define addressed and resolved? I mean, you wrote that phrase, so you had to have some meaning in your head, right, when you wrote it?
Okay. As far,
What does addressed and resolved mean to you for violations?
that there were violations that were addressed
Okay.
and a resolution was come to.
Okay. In your opinion, does that roughly mean the same as abated and corrected? That's kind of the regulatory phrase.
Yeah, so
Okay. Mr. Falso, you just testified that you had occasional communication with Mr. Hoops. Have you been in communication with him about the status of the company's violation since then? Since the January 2018 letter?
not that I recall.
Not that you recall. What do you, when you talk to Mr. Hoops, what do you talk to him about?
It depends on, I mean, you have meetings, you know, as a company, so it varies. I mean, there's not just one subject all the time.
Okay. Did you use any information Mr. Hoops gave you to prepare the permit application that you recall?
Not that I recall, you know, maybe for some officers, but we kind of knew who they were, you know. Probably no direct contact asking them how to fill them out or anything.
Okay, so you're talking, there's a part of the permit application that lists the officers of the company and
Correct.
and maybe you consulted with him to prepare that information.
I would doubt if I would call him directly on that. I mean,
Okay. Mr. Thrall, let's go back to DEQ Exhibit 2, page 29, that you were talking with Mr. Fry about. Page 29 of that exhibit, DEQ 2. It's the table of the violation history.
Oh, okay.
If that's easier for you to find that.
Okay.
Okay. So I think you testified that you were the person that put together this information, right?
or under my direction.
Under your direction, okay. What sources of information did you use to compile this particular table?
Our violation history, I've been at Eagle Butte and Bel Air Mines for 18 years, and we've had 5 violations in those 18 years. So coming up with the history was not difficult. I mean,
Okay.
you know,
And we just were talking about a letter about violations somewhere else, but not in Eagle Butte and Bel Air. Did you think that those violations should have been in this permit application?
no, they shouldn't have been.
And why do you make that
Because Eagle Butte and Bel Air are the applicant.
the applicant? Okay. And you and Mr. Fry were talking about this a little bit, that 406 A Romanet 14 talks about the applicant, right? Okay. Are you also aware of a section called 406N Romanet 7 in the Environmental Quality Act?
I'm not.
You're not aware of that section at all? Okay. And are you aware generally about the DEQ's ownership and control rules, about violation checks and?
Yes.
Okay. And are you aware of that phrase under common ownership and control?
Yes.
Okay, and so we just established that Mr. Hoops is the owner of Blackjewel. Does it also follow then that if he owns or controls any other mines, those violations attribute back to
Correct.
Blackjewel
With the ABS.
with the AVS? Okay, and we talked a little bit about the AVS. So in your history of permitting here, you've kind of relied on the DEQ to look at that stuff in other states, right?
Correct, that's their,
Okay.
that's their portion of it.
There's their portion of it. And where do you draw that assumption or conclusion? Is there a rule that you've gone to decide that?
I'm just gonna say, just on experience. I mean, I know the permit process, and the process is we submit it, they run the ABS.
Okay. So you're not aware of any permitting requirements, either in the Environmental Quality Act or under DEQ regs that talk about this schedule of violations applying to mines under common ownership and control?
What I'm testifying to is, as the applicant, I put our violations in here. And I fully understood that the DEQ would run the ABS.
Okay, but where do you?
All of, the tie with Jeff Hoops.
But are you aware of the requirements that talk about the permit application and what it needs to include?
I feel I did through what I did,
What you did, okay.
how I completed it.
Okay, so it's just your past experience, you've always relied on the ABS and you knew DEQ would do it, so you've never thought to put in any of this violation history for mines under common ownership or control?
No, as the applicant, I put our violation 3-year history.
Are you aware, Mr. Thrall, of any violations of the Clean Water Act associated with mines under common ownership and control with Blackjewel?
I've never looked into it. Eagle Butte and Bel Air are 2 fairly busy mines. So
Okay. But you're not aware of, say, a Revelation Energy notice of violation related to the Clean Water Act?
Yeah, I have no information on Revelation Energy.
Okay. And you testified that you've ran these ABS checks yourself, just as somebody to log on the system and do an ABS? Okay.
Sure.
Are you aware whether those checks come back with, say, violations from the EPA?
I am a guest. I don't have a membership to the ABS, so I get a very basic report.
Okay.
Can't look into it a lot.
Okay. All right, let's turn to the real property bond and go back to DQ Exhibit 10. So this is that letter that we were looking at earlier a few minutes ago. You there?
Yep.
All right. Could you read that third paragraph for me?
Regarding the Black Thunder Ranch, the property is collateral for Bel Air's current bond held by Ventura. Ownership of the ranch is still with Contura and will not be transferred until the permanent transfers are completed and the lien released. Black Jewel intends on replacing the collateral with conventional reclamation bonds.
Okay. What information did you rely on to write that paragraph? Did somebody in the company tell you this was going to be the case?
Yeah, through meetings and stuff, I'm sure.
Through meetings, but you don't remember who specifically told you that the real property collateral bond would be replaced?
Well, at that time, no, that was the decision that we made. If you look, this is January, we're a month into this company, so we're making decisions at all the time. So
Okay.
at that time, that's what the decision was.
Okay, so yeah, at that time, so we talked a little bit earlier about the bond submissions that were then in August of 2018. Were you involved in that process of submitting those bonds to DEQ? And the real property collateral bond is part of that bonding package for Black Jewel, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's, even though in January you wrote that you actually plan to not use real property collateral bonding, now you do as the company?
Sure, business decisions change all the time.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that, because there were some statements made on, by counsel for Contura to the contrary. And so to clarify too, on this Exhibit 10, so Black Jewel itself doesn't actually have title to this property now, right?
Correct.
So it's under Contura's ownership.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Fowler, are you aware of an affidavit that you recently submitted to state court saying that your company is actively seeking to sell the land at issue?
No, that's not what it said. We're not actively seeking. We look at business decisions all the time. So there's people that would like to have it.
Okay, is this land under your ownership, is Black Jewel? Or is it under Contura's ownership?
No, but it will be once the permits are transferred.
Okay, so you're seeking to sell property you don't own right now?
No,
Objection,
Justice
Testament. I'm sorry.
Okay, I do have a
Just a minute,
demonstrative.
hold on.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
There was a question, there was an objection, then there was an answer. So I'd like to know where we stand with the last question. Do you object? Do you want me to strike the answer that was just given?
I'd like to strike the question because it misstates the testimony and it misstates the affidavit.
Join that same.
I'd like to let him look at the affidavit too, if it's, if he's the hearing officer, and let her read it
In
as
that
well.
case, can we just start with a new question relating to the document we're talking about?
Sure, and I do have a copy of the affidavit. If it's helpful for the purposes here, I can use it as a demonstrative exhibit before the council. If there's any objections. It does say before the Environmental Quality Council State of Wyoming at the top of it, by the way, so.
So before you show this to anybody, just ask them
I'll just
what
pass
it
it on.
is and establish foundation for it, and then you can, as far as I'm concerned, show it to whoever you want.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. Mr. Thrall, are you aware of an affidavit signed April 10th of 2019 that you wrote? Okay. Not enough, or do you want me to?
Try this question. I gave you a document. What is it?
That's fine. So can you explain this document, Mr. Thrall?
It's a document kind of showing how I relate to the land, basically, what my role is.
Okay. And are you aware that this affidavit was submitted in a state court proceeding with some representations made on your behalf about things that you said in the affidavit?
Okay.
Okay.
I wasn't aware, but.
You're where? Okay. Is it,
I'm sorry, I think he said he wasn't aware.
Right.
So he said he wasn't aware.
So let me object and try and straighten this out. I have no problem if you want to question a witness about the affidavit and statements he makes with regard to the status of the property. To the extent you want to ask questions about what's being done in the state their first judicial district proceedings, that's irrelevant to what we're doing here. So if you want to ask them about, what did you say in the affidavit? Is it true? Is it not? Do you want to expand on it or whatever? Fine, but if we limit it to that, I think we'll all be in good shape.
I guess that was an objection. Do you have a response to that?
That's fine. If no one has seen this on the council yet, so it's difficult to talk about the affidavit at this point, but there is a paragraph 10 in the affidavit.
Right, so what is this document? Did you write it? Did you sign it? What does it say in paragraph 10? If you do those things in that order, we're in good shape.
Okay, that's fine, Mr. Casti. All right, Mr. Thrall, so it's your signature on this affidavit, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and there's a date on this affidavit. Could you read it to me?
10th of April, 2019.
Okay. And why did you write this affidavit?
It was with the confidentiality of the appraisal.
Okay, so at a time, there was an issue in this proceeding about the confidentiality of the appraisal, right?
Correct.
Okay, and you wrote this affidavit to maybe talk about that, or why did you write it?
For just showing why the appraisal should be confidential.
Okay. Could you read paragraph 10 for me?
Objection to rule of completeness. Let the witness read the entire statement, not anything out of context.
The entire affidavit, is that what you're saying?
Allow him to read the entire affidavit, and if she wants to parse out pieces and give very small pieces to the
That would
council.
be fine with me. I have no objection to him
allow
reading the
him to
entire
review it.
affidavit.
Allow him to review it, is what I'm asking.
Okay. First of all, it sounds like council would like you to give the witness an opportunity to review the affidavit, and then, not sure we need it if we're gonna, I mean, is it your intention to give copies of this to the Environmental Quality Council?
That was my original intention, yes.
I'm sorry. It appears that she's trying to read into the record pieces of the confidential affidavit and present just pieces of evidence. Object, join the objection. with the
Mr. Hearing Officer, it's not a confidential affidavit.
Ma'am, please finish my objection,
Sure,
Mr.
go
Hearing
ahead,
Officer.
Counsel.
Thank you very much. This deals directly with a state court case, and the objection was very well laid out by Mr. Casti for the DEQ. I don't think we should be allowing him to just read in little bits and pieces of it. I don't think the whole thing should come in, but let him review the whole thing and let her ask questions about it, as opposed to reading in little pieces of it.
Mr. Hearing Officer, I'll just say this directly bears on the ownership of the property and what Black Jewel intends to do with it, which have been brought up in opening statements and various questions throughout this proceeding.
I don't think there's been an objection to relevancy, but it sounds like there was an objection to the foundation. So and also an objection regarding the completeness.
The rule of completeness,
Any language?
406.
Right, any language. It sounds like the objection is that if you want to offer part of a document into evidence, the whole document should be in evidence. So you're going to ask him to read something from it. I have him read the whole thing.
That would be fine with me. If you want to take a minute, Mr. Thrall, review the text and then read it for the record.
Read the whole thing. That's what
I
you
think
want.
that's what your counsel wants you to do, so.
Okay, I, Mark Thrall, being, oh, I'm sorry. Being first duly sworn to hereby state and affirm the following. Number one, I am the age of 18 years and am giving the following affidavit of my own free will. Number two, I work for Black Jewel LLC, and I've worked for Black Jewel LLC since it acquired the Bel Air Needle Mines. Number three, my role for Black Jewel LLC is that of Environmental Manager Senior. Number four, as part of my duties as Environmental Manager, I must remain apprised and aware of business opportunities and developments related to lands owned and controlled by Black Jewel LLC. It is crucially important for our business to keep appraisals of our land, and especially the land at issue in this matter, non-public. Particularly, this land abuts against land controlled or owned by direct competitors of Black Jewel LLC. Number seven, We're then approached by a third-party buyer at this point in time for a portion of the lands at issue in this petition. Number 8, we are in the midst of confidential negotiations for potential sale of this land. Number 9, one point of contention, which would place us at an extreme disadvantage, would be the value associated with this land in this appraisal. Number 10, because we are actively seeking to sell the land at issue in this petition, the decimation to the public at large, the appraised value would eliminate our competitive advantage and financially harm Black Jewel LLC.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thrall. So couple of minutes ago, we were visiting about that phrase, actively seeking to sell the land. And at that point, your testimony was that you didn't say that, but let's look at that paragraph 10. Did you actually say that?
Did I actually say?
That we are actively seeking to sell the land at issue?
You gotta remember that we run a business. Your business decisions change all the time. We cannot sell this land. We have agreements. We don't own it currently. So when you run a coal mine, you're not looking at, next month. You're looking years down the road, right? So to run a business decisions change every day.
Okay, but just to clarify your testimony, so Black Jewel LLC at the current time does not actually own this land that we've been talking about.
We control it. We do not own it.
You control it. How do you control it if you don't own
We
it?
have an agreement with Contura.
Okay. Yeah, could you describe that agreement? What do you mean by control?
I would have to defer to the legal people on the agreements and stuff.
Okay, do you think control extends to being able to sell it before the title transfers to you?
No.
No, okay. Paragraph 9 that you read, Mr. Thrall, you talk about the value associated with this land. Is that public right now? I mean, do we know the value through the appraisal of the land?
You do?
We do, okay. Mr. Thrall, are you familiar with the appraisal?
I am.
Okay, and without getting into specifics necessarily, we were touching a little bit earlier on mineral ownership of the land, correct?
Correct.
Okay, are you familiar with the mineral ownership of the land?
I'm not.
You're not. Were you involved in trying to get the Beller West coal lease at that time? Alpha Natural Resources, probably?
Well, we started an LBA on the west, yeah.
Okay, and for the record, LBA means lease by application. It's a
Correct.
term of art in the federal coal leasing program.
Correct.
Okay. So are you aware for part of this land that the federal government owns the coal?
Correct.
Is there any part of this land that you're aware of that maybe the federal government doesn't own the coal?
I don't know. That lease by application, we've dropped since then, so I don't know, it's a non-issue.
It's not an issue. Okay. How about the oil and gas ownership? Are you aware of who owns the oil and gas resources on this property?
I'm not.
You're not?
Our
Okay.
land manager would be.
Are you aware of whether there's active leases or wells on this property at all?
I can't answer that.
You can't answer that at all? Okay. I have no further questions.
All right, I want to ask if anybody knows whether we're going to be locked in at 5 o'clock.
We can stay later, since I work after 5 anyway. I told them we'd probably be able to get out of here by 6.
Sounds like we can get out, we might not be able to get back in.
I'll tell everybody how to get out, because you can't go out the gate, Katie.
Okay. So, let's see, we've had direct examination, like, dual cross-examination from the objector. Do we want to proceed with cross-examination of this witness before we conclude for the day?
I would love to get
Yes.
this witness.
Yes, please.
So we'd like the DEQ now, and
I'd love to be
Watch how fast I can do it.
all right.
I have no questions.
All right, does Contour have any questions?
I do. Thanks for making me look bad, Mr. Cast. Just a few questions. You talked a little bit about the permit transfer applications in exhibits 2 and 3. You remember that, Mr. Thrall?
Yes.
To the best of your knowledge, is the information contained in exhibits 2 and 3 accurate?
It's accurate.
Do you still have the statutory section 46A XIV in front of you?
I do.
If you go to the very last paragraph with me, there's a phrase there that says, any surface coal mining operation. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you understand the distinction between surface coal mining and underground coal mining?
I do.
So you know that there are mines that are not considered surface coal mines. Is that fair?
That's correct.
You familiar with Black Jewel's eastern mining operations?
Mr. Hearing Officer, just for the record, I would object that this goes beyond the scope of direct examination.
Would you like to answer that objection, Council?
Sure, I didn't even finish my question. What I'm going to inquire about is the eastern mining operations of Black Jewel East, which Ms. Anderson asked him about.
On cross-examination
And Mr. Hearing Officer, I didn't specifically say surface or underground in any of my questions.
Ms. Anderson has been trying to tell the council that this somehow has meaning or something in this case. I'm going to demonstrate one of the ways it doesn't. I think that's fair rebuttal for us to talk about.
I think I'm going to allow you to ask questions along this line, so long as we have time.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I will be brief. Mr. Thrall, are you familiar with Black Jewel's affiliated eastern mining operations, how they are conducted?
I am somewhat.
Okay. Do you know if some of those are underground coal mines?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Do you know how many of them are surface coal mines?
I do not.
Okay. But fair to say there are at least some of those mining operations that are underground coal operations.
Correct.
All right. I have no more questions. Thank you, Mr. Thrall.
I think at this stage, we ask the council members if they have questions. Any questions from the council?
I have one.
Okay, Councilmember Cora.
This is John Cora. So picking up on the last line of questioning, or comments, the reference says incurred by the applicant in connection with any surface coal mining, surface.
Right.
So the dialogue here said, yeah, maybe some of the mines in the east are underground, some may not be. I would, it raises a question in my mind that when you look at the ABS system, that long list of items in that, there, are all of those related to underground mining operations in the east?
I could not answer that. I couldn't, I would have to go through the ABS and look at each mine and then go back and see if it's surface or underground.
Because the question, I think there's a lot of discussion here about what constitutes ownership and control and how broad that reach is and how the ABS system is used by both the applicant and an agency. And to my mind, and let me just say, I'm a miner. Well, I'm an old retired miner, let me clarify that. But I do understand the difference between underground and surface coal mining. And this language specifically says surface coal mining. And I guess I was anticipating council over there to take me somewhere and actually say all those citations in the ABS system were underground coal mines. But you didn't. You stopped by saying, well, yeah, maybe there's some, maybe there aren't. So you don't know is your answer.
I do not.
Okay.
Which are which?
It's I just, Mr. Hearing Officer, that's a question I'll keep pounding on, I guess.
Very good. You got the answer, it was a short answer.
I would assume some are surface, some are underground, and some are closed. I mean, not
And
active.
then, of course, the follow-on question is, are any of the surface operations in the ABS system at the beginning? I know they were all resolved according to the last letter from ABS, but I'm just curious. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from other council members?
I have a question.
Councilmember,
JD Radokovich. Regarding the bonds, are those renewed every year? out of my total ignorance, I don't know how this process works.
Correct.
And then how often do those change? Are there different bondholders? Are they always just kind of rolled over the same ones, or do they change?
Yeah. The bond changes every year. The estimate is submitted every year. So the bond amount will change somewhat. Historically, once you have a surety or something, you keep rolling those over. It's probably well known, I mean, sureties are difficult to get in Wyoming especially. So once you have one, you try to just keep rolling them.
Any other questions from council members?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I have a question.
Councilmember,
Steve Lenz. So, Mr. Thrall, your language in there, in what you read to us, said the value associated with this land eliminates our competitive advantage. Can you elaborate on that? Is that based on the valuation that we are debating and discussing in this hearing? That you said you had prior knowledge to and had actually read that appraisal?
No, it's not anything, that statement's nothing to do with the appraisal. What it is, it's similar if you're gonna sell your house. If everybody knows what it appraises for, that's the price.
Okay, so, thank you. No further questions.
See if Cassie wants to sell.
any other council member questions? I'm not hearing any.
I do not have any questions.
Oh, thanks for saying that. It sounds like there are no questions from the council members, and I don't remember where we were with our last. Is that the end of the questions for this witness? We're going back to redirect.
Briefly, Mr. Hearing Officer, thank you.
Go ahead, Council.
Mr. Thrall, you were asked about Part 7, that's Romanet VII, and it's talking about the citations. They have to have been in the process of being corrected to the satisfaction of the authority which has jurisdiction over that violation. And now, to your knowledge, when a citation is issued and is marked conditional, it's either being corrected or has been corrected, at least to some degree, to that jurisdictional body. Is that right? Is that your understanding of that?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, very important for this hearing is an objection under 4060 that Black Jewel is not fit to be an operator in Wyoming. I'm sorry. I apologize. I do that too much. One part of contention in this hearing is under 4060 that Black Jewel is not fit to be an operator in Wyoming. And the contention, really more or less the insinuation without any firm evidence, is this Part O. Now, any of those violations which are now marked conditional, none of those are causing irreparable harm to the environment or indicate reckless, knowing, or intentional conduct on behalf of anyone at Black Jewel.
Mr. Hearing Officer, I would have an objection because I think Mr. Thrall testified that he doesn't actually know much about these violations and wouldn't actually be able to answer that question.
Well, if that's the case, he can say he doesn't know, and so I'm going to allow him to answer the question.
With my experience and the number of years that I've been in environmental compliance, nobody is going to willfully violate or do irreparable harm. It just doesn't work that way. And if you do something that is to that level, it's not going to get conditional that quick. I mean, that's got to be such a serious violation that it's not something that you can fix that quick. So, through my experience, it's just not conceivable.
And so with that, would you agree with Mr. Whitland's testimony earlier today that the permits should be transferred to Black Jewel?
I do agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Thrall. Thank you, council members. That's all the questions I have of him.
Okay, are we finished with this witness, or do we need council member questions to follow up on that? Looks like you're finished. Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Brockman, as you know, had to leave, but he'll be here first thing in the morning. and I can continue my case in chief, I'd move if it's appropriate for me to do so, that we adjourn for the evening and grab some dinner. I don't miss many meals.
And I think the council can make that motion themselves.
Well, does anybody, is there any problem with adjourning the contested case hearing?
No.
Excuse me, going off the record and just recessing the contested case hearing. All right, so let's go off the record in the contested case hearing then, and we'll reconvene tomorrow morning at 9:00. That's consistent with everyone's understanding. And do we need to do anything with, Chairman, do we need to do anything with the council regarding recessing?
Yeah, I just need to, do I have a motion to recess for today?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, so to get out of this facility, you can't